I just watched my watch turn to 12:30, and we are nothing if not prompt in this session. So thanks, people, for coming back. Um, Dr. Brandon Boatwright, famous from his prior session in the Flash Talks, is back with us. Assistant Professor of the Department of Communication, Director of the Social Media Listing Center at Clemson, is going to take us on a deeper dive into Sprinkler. In the prior session, we heard about mostly about Listening Explorer, and Brandon's going to take us on a little tour and into some deeper information about Sprinkler listening topics or insights. So, Brandon, thank you so much. I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Valerie, thank you. And I appreciate the introduction as being listed as famous rather than infamous. So, I mean, at least there's that. I appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. I am excited to be with you all this afternoon to kind of talk through a topic that is important to me in my own research regarding social media analytics. One of the things that I think is common in doing social media research is this notion of big data, right? Having these larger data sets, and computational techniques to help explore, analyze those large data sets that we have access to right at our fingertips with the platforms like Sprinkler that are so useful and helpful for us. The one thing that I want to talk about a little bit more today, though, is not just necessarily collecting big data, but collecting specific data, the right data that you need for your research projects. Oftentimes we can set lofty expectations for, broad searches that pull in millions and billions of posts, and that's obviously very helpful in a number of different capacities. But one thing that I really appreciate about the topics feature in Sprinkler is that we have the flexibility to do both. We can pull large data sets over time. We can create searches, set them to automatically run, and basically just let them go up until a certain time point where we either meet a data threshold or the date range for our search has expired or whatever the case might be. But we also have the ability to really hone in specifically on some of the data that's really important to the work that we're doing. So I will speak to that kind of briefly, some of my own work as we go through this demo of the topics feature. But I also want this session to be as interactive as possible. So I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on the chat, on the Q&A as well. Lisa and Valerie, if anything comes up, please don't hesitate to tell me to stop talking. I will go on a roll, and otherwise we'll be here all afternoon. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you all can see my Sprinkler login, my home page. Maneuver a couple other things here just so I can see what's going on. There we go. All right, so once we log into the Sprinkler homepage, we can open the Launchpad. And again, I think for the most part in the last session, we covered primarily this Listening Explore function. This session, this go around, we're going to spend a lot of time looking at this, particularly looking at the listening function and specifically the topics feature associated with Sprinkler. Now, there are other things associated with this as well, and we'll kind of get to these throughout the course of the presentation. But for now, I'm just going to click into topics so you can see exactly what we're looking at here. When we create topic searches in Sprinkler, we have the ability to customize the parameters around a number of different filtration techniques that are extremely helpful. Again, like I said, not just in creating large data sets, but in getting the right sorts of data. I'll walk you through the collection process for setting up these topics and also some of the different features associated with it. Again, I'll try to draw on some of my own research projects to illustrate some of these points. But again, if you have any questions, clarifying questions or anything along those lines, please feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I will be happy to address them. I'll give you a couple of examples right now of things that we've been looking at just kind of in prior research. One project that we have that's currently ongoing is looking at vaccine hesitancy in rural communities in South Carolina. And so we've created a geolocation-based search utilizing these different keywords. So if I'm going to go in, I'm going to click on this to edit the search just so I can show you what's involved in this. So essentially there are 4 different query types that we can create using the topics feature, a query-based listening, very similar to what you would do in the Listening Explorer feature. We can also do an account-based listening. So if you have, social media accounts that are linked with your Sprinklr profile, you can do some more advanced listening on those owned accounts that are synced with your Sprinklr instance. We can also do profile and domain-based listening, which is super helpful, and I'll kind of walk through that a little bit later as well. But again, one of the cool things that I love about this is that we can do more location-based listening with Sprinklr as well. So for instance, we're looking at 3 different rural communities in the state of South Carolina, pulling mentions of vaccine, anti-vax, vax, or vaccination. And so again, we can very quickly just click on, this map, type in a location, and make a determination of how far we want to expand our search radius, whether that's 10, 15, 1 mile even, from a specific point on the map. For this profile, we created 3 kind of sample locations to set up. But keep in mind here too, we're doing this search primarily based on location, but we can also add in different query types as well. So for instance, we're looking at mentions of the words vaccine or anti-vax, vax, or vaccination that are coming from these areas. Now, this over here on the right-hand side will show you the number of mentions that are coming in around your search for the past 24 hours. You can see that there's not anything that's being pulled right now, but I'll go back and kind of show you what that data looks like. But again, we can add in additional query features here, basic features as well as advanced features. I'll walk through that in just a second as well. Yes, that is fine. And then we can also apply different filters as well. So we can look for particular social channels, web resources, traditional sources, TV, print, and radio. We can also include paid owned accounts, filter by languages, locations, very similar again to the operational capacity that you would have in the Listening Explore feature. You can also filter out spam or unwanted Twitter profile lists, that some of those that you can either pre-create or that are identified as being spam. You can filter out spam or unwanted profiles or domains even. You can also exclude retweets, exclude quoted retweets. I like to include those in the search here as well. Include messages from only verified Twitter accounts if that's something that you're wanting to do. Include messages that match the query in the username or in the handle, so of a particular account. Include messages that have matched keywords in the URL. Exclude possibly sensitive Twitter content. Comes in super helpful when you're doing demos from experience. Include messages from profiles with a minimum followers count, and you can actually set that to whatever number you desire there as well. I'm gonna go ahead and save my topic, and what I'm gonna do is actually open that up, open my dashboard. And so this is looking at the conversation in the month of March around that particular hashtag or those particular search terms. So I can see, in this dashboard, some advanced analytics looking at top themes and key narratives discussed around each project or each topic. You can see the list of positive, negative, neutral mentions, their percentage increase over time. You also get the conversation streams. So you can actually see the conversation that's happening in real time, as the case may be. This is a historical data set from back in March. But we can go through and look at all the different metrics here. So for instance, we're looking at content. We have the full list of mentions that are included here. We have some in-depth information on the number of distinct users that are involved in the conversation. So you can see that there's really only a handful of people who are really driving the conversation at any one point in time. The majority is coming from Twitter, again, because we're doing a location base, but we also get most popular posts rate based on engagements. And we can actually, drill down to see what some of those engagements look like. We can go in and actually explore the actual account of the individual that sent the message. Let's see, we can go through and look at different trends as well. Again, kind of that AI thematic analysis that's built into the program, which is really incredible to see. Again, just some of the mentions and some of the themes that are emerging, such as developing a blood clot, potentially as being one of those message strategies that's going to keep people from, wanting to get vaccinated. And we go back and we see the top hashtags, the top themes involved in the discussion, top keywords. We also get the sentiment, the emotional temperature of the conversation. Again, super helpful to kind of see the breakdown across these different metrics as well, by hashtags, and even by demographics. We get a breakdown of age, if it's available there, authors, top niche interests, which is really interesting just to kind of see that play out. And then, mentions across cities. So there's more, coming out from these different areas. And again, these are just 3 sample areas that we created just to kind of showcase that. So that is, again, a really basic overview of the geolocation-based search. Let me do another one just really quickly to show you how we set that up. I'm going to go back, delete this. And let's say we just would create a quick search. We'll do topic name. Lincoln, Nebraska. And we'll do this as a quick research thing. I'm going to do a location-based listening search. Click next. And if I just want to create a search, it's loading. 1 second. I've set defaults to Clemson here, but we're going to do. Okay. I think. Assuming it's gonna. Well, it's not pulling up here, so let's broaden it out. You know what? Let's just stick to Clemson and see what's happening here. It's not pulling up for some reason, but I'm going to click on that, submit. And this, okay, that's great. See, there we go. Trying to clear out the filtered data on social media, which would be super helpful. And this is great. That's coming from Clemson. Awesome. Love that. But we can filter out, again, a lot of that inappropriate content from Twitter. If I go and apply filters, let's see, exclude possibly sensitive Twitter content. There we go. I'm going to go back and clear that. But again, we can go in and actually run searches, again, specifically around, if I want to look at like mentions of alumni. You can go in and see, here are people who are mentioning Clemson alumni over the past 24 hours, and we can keep scraping that again based in real-time location-based searching. So I'm going to click on cancel here. Let's see. This other profile that we've been pulling from is based on a profile or domain-based search. We're looking at mentions from the Ukrainian government over the course of the conflict that's been happening in Ukraine. So if I click on that, I'll go to edit. And you'll notice here on the query type, I have clicked profile or domain-based listening. And so I can click on the next button that will take me to the way that this is set up is that I can create profile lists looking at bloggers, brand executives, competitor leads, detractors, employees, and these are all customizable. I can create lists around anything. So if I wanted to look at like, influential alumni within the context of my university setting, I could create a list and pull from that list. For the context of this study that we're looking at, we've been pulling data from Ukraine's official Twitter account, as well as Kyiv's official Twitter account. And we haven't been adding any filters beyond that. We've just been wanting to pull the raw data associated with it. And so over here, you can see again on the right, these are posts that have come in from the past 24 hours as a bit of a preview. Let's see, I'm gonna go back to that just so you can see what the data looks like again overall. Let's see, from March to I don't know why we're not getting all of our data here. It's not pulling up for me, but let me see. I'll go to another one and do a different search based on that. So I'm gonna do another one just as a sample topic to show you all again kind of the search for getting to the right data. A previous study that a colleague of mine and I had worked on was looking at conversations around COVID-19, specifically from frontline healthcare workers. We had a hard time trying to figure out exactly, how are we going to run a search that is pulling data specifically from these frontline healthcare workers. And before we had Sprinkler, we were trying to think through like, okay, what are the different strategies that we can go through to do that? We started looking at, keyword searches such as, as a nurse. We put as a nurse in quotations and they would say, and COVID, right? As a frontline healthcare professional and COVID. But we started to think like, what if there was another way to potentially identify frontline healthcare professionals beyond, the fact that they have to mention it in the text to suggest that they are frontline healthcare professionals. One thing that's kind of unique about Sprinkler is that we have the ability to search based on user bios as well. So let's say we want to do like COVID, frontline healthcare professionals. Set this up as a research and do query-based listening. And let's say I want to do kind of an advanced search that looks at some of these specific and more advanced operators. And this is really where you get to the more advanced data filtration techniques that are associated with the topic search. Obviously, you can see your basic Boolean operators here and or not and near. But if you scroll down, you can continue to see that there's a whole bunch of different operators that we can use to filter through all of this data. Author, city, comment on sender ID, which tracks comments around a specific parent post. Content from a certain continent, country, language, engaging with a particular handle. So if you wanted to pull, content that was searching mentions of a particular handle, you could pull that directly. You can engage with retweets or track retweets, quoted tweets, etc. Let's see. Oops. So we can actually use another one of the filters that I have found especially helpful, especially in the context of the study looking at frontline healthcare professionals, is looking at exact user bio. So I can type in exact contact user bio, and enter that in this box. And one of the things that my colleague and I, started to look for was, well, how many people in their bio refer to themselves as nurse? And here we have the total number of 87,000 mentions of individuals who are posting content indicating in their Twitter bio that they are nurses. And so we actually did this and coupled it with a keyword-based search. So we looked at exact user bios mentioning nurse, but we looked specifically at those who had that in their bio, and we're looking at topics related to COVID. And we pulled all of those conversations, did a large-scale data analysis to kind of look through, what the conversation was like. We actually did a computational content analysis to examine that conversation. But beyond that, we actually reached out to some of the active participants in that conversation for in-depth interviews to look at how their use of social media during the COVID crisis, during the pandemic, how they leverage social media as a way to seek social support, to inform publics around what was going on, to combat misinformation, things of that nature. So I'm going to cancel back and go to one other profile really quickly that I just wanted to show you before I take a minute to pause and maybe answer some questions. We actually have another researcher who is really interested in not just pulling social media data, but also pulling discussion-based conversations as well. So we actually have a PhD student in one of our departments who is pulling information from, let's see, I'll go back here and show you what the actual profile looks like. Apologies for that. At the profile. We have a student who is actually pulling data from thebump.com, looking at conversations around pregnancy that are happening in these discussion forums. So we're not just pulling, data from Twitter and Instagram and Reddit or whatever, but we're actually doing some web scraping and pulling conversations that are happening from discussion forums. And that has been really fascinating for us to set up and explore. We have not had that functionality prior to Sprinkler, and so seeing that has been very helpful. I feel like I've been talking a lot and throwing a lot of stuff out at you. I'm gonna take a quick question or quick second to look at the questions. I see one that's come up. Might have missed this, but can you look at sentiment keywords by geography or gender and compare different areas? So for instance, yes, when we go into that search, so I'm gonna open up the dashboard again. And I'll go to demographics.
And just in case, because we're recording this, and I'm not sure if the questions show on the recording, the question was that whether you could look at sentiment keywords by geography or gender and compare different areas. For example, could you compare sentiment or keywords between Honeopath and Due West, or South Carolina versus North Carolina, and so on? And if so, can you extract the data and calculate statistical significance?
Oh, let's see. So we may not be able to, just because the sample is very small here. We are able, again, to extract by city and extract the messages from that. With the second part of your question, can you extract the data and calculate statistical significance? I think the question to that is, or the answer to that is that it kind of depends on the sample size, obviously for one, but also, kind of what you're really looking at in terms of the sentiment, how it's being coded, that sort of thing. I'm not sure if that's really answering your question, Kelly.
And Kelly, if you would like to speak, I think I can find you. If you want to talk a little bit more about yes, I can. If you would like to talk, feel free to chime in.
Okay, yeah. So where I was going with that was essentially, if I wanted to compare, say, the different sentiment between men and women on a topic, or different sentiment between North Carolina and South Carolina on a topic, or even potentially cooler, those interests that you were talking about, where I think one of them said like they like reading versus, yes, art.
Yeah.
You know, just to sort of be able to drill down, can you see if any of those little things make a difference in the sentiment that's being expressed? And if so, pulling that raw data and actually calculating the statistical significance. So I was just sort of wondering how deep you can go in this. It sounds like some of those slices seem really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And thank you for hopping on and kind of clarifying and explaining a little bit. Yeah, one of the things that I love about the platform, and, again, just kind of in exploring it, every little piece of content and every widget that we have for us or here in this conversation, like we can go in and do a more detailed kind of granular look at that and extract all that metadata. And I think, did y'all talk through kind of well, I'll go through and pull it just to show you. So I'll click on the conversation stream, and I can export this as an Excel, and that'll pop up here in just a second. There we go. So we can filter through all those different layers and then extract the raw data, again, kind of save them in their own individual files, and then, use whatever statistical software to, create the different variables, or utilize the different variables that are here, and test for significance between those groups. See if I can pull that. Pranay, I see you've got your hand up, so I'll let you hop in here.
Thank you, Brandon. And Kelly, I would like to just provide my my reply as well to the question put forth by you. So with respect to the breakdown by cities, yes, we have a widget by which we can definitely go ahead and do the breakdown of sentiment with respect to the different genders, as well as with respect to different geographies as well. The thing is that we would need to create a customized widget for this, but this is something which can definitely be done.
Excellent. Thank you, Pranay. Are there any other questions? I'm checking the chat as well. Don't see any more there. In that case, I'm going to go back to show you another feature that's within this listening component, is that we can look, we can create these topical searches, but in order to help us, conduct these topical searches in more detail, we can create themes associated with our searches that help us to, again, kind of refine and apply different kind of analytics associated with that search. We can create keyword lists as well. So for instance, if we created a keyword search around Clemson academics, we've created basically a search that has all the different departments on campus, some university initiatives, so that we can take this keyword list And if I go back 2 topics, can add a topic. Next here, we can add keyword lists around academics. And that'll pull all of those, that'll import all of these keywords here, in no time as well. So that makes things pretty easy for us to be able to kind of preload all these different search terms and include them directly as well. Another thing that I actually really like about this platform is that it gives you the suggested keywords here. So we're looking at academics, but we could look at ecology, institute, informatics, all sorts of different keywords that are listed there as well. What was that?
Brandon,
Yes.
you showed a place to set up themes and a place to set up keywords. And then you showed how the keywords worked kind of how I expected, like, oh, yay, it's a shortcut to just including everything that you already set up beforehand if you want to reuse it. Are themes used differently?
Themes are used differently. They're used as a way to categorize data in more detail. Let me go back to themes to pull this up. I honestly haven't done much with the themes. Pranay, if you're still available, could you speak on the role of the themes feature?
Yeah, absolutely. So, consider themes as an additional layer of filter with respect to a set of keywords that we can add over and above a base topic, listening topic that we have created. So, for instance, the best example that I can share is the one that we have currently set up for some of our partners as well, more specifically for Nebraska, for LSU, and also for University of Alabama. So this is with respect to the mental health dashboard as well as a listening topic that we have created. So what we did was we created firstly a base topic which would provide us all sort of mentions or conversations which would revolve around any of the brand oriented terms, maybe University of Alabama or University of Nebraska or Louisiana State University. And once we created that listening topic, on the top of that, we added some listening themes specifically to identify conversations which would reflect any sort of issues related to mental health. More specifically, talking about suicide related conversations or depression or accidents or assault. So we created these listening themes which would have keywords associated to each of these themes, such as suicide or depression or assault, and then applied these listening themes on top of that base listening query or that topic that we have created for a particular brand. So in that way, we were able to fetch in the listening dashboard only those types of conversations that were associated with any of the listening themes related to mental health that we have already created. So that's how listening themes really help to get very specific amount or very specific types of conversations from a more broader topic or a more broader listening query in general.
Thanks, Pranay. So it sounds like themes are kind of like filters within the topic. Does that sound right?
Yeah, you can consider that if you would want to have very relevant listening, or you would want to have a specific type of listening conversations fresh from a more generic topic that is already created.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, great. Pranay, thank you for that and for clarifying. Excellent. Wonderful. So these are the themes that are created in our instance, and you can see the variety associated with them here as well. Back to homepage. And I do want to just really quickly give you a couple of other insights with use of the topics feature. So once you create a topic, you can tell it to start collecting data, to start fetching data. So you can see that, you know, like you can toggle whether data fetching is on or off for these various topics that are listed here. So for instance, if I wanted to start fetching data around Clemson athletics, I can go in and preview this. And see what that conversation will look like. So it's starting to populate data. You get some of the top words. You get estimated volume. Over the last 30 days, there have been 45,000 mentions. And again, you can kind of get estimated distribution for that as well to see where the majority of the conversation is coming from. So I've toggled that switch on. So from the time that I've toggled that on, Sprinkler is now fetching all of that data and actively, you know, archiving it and collecting it without me having to really interfere. I don't have to go in and partition, you know, by time frame. I can just set it and let it keep running. Now, one thing again that I really appreciate about this is that we can also create a backfill for a search. So if we click on backfill here, we can select the sources that we want to pull data from, select all of them, and backfill up to, let's say I want to go to April 1st. And my, oops. First, save. And I want to end at today. So click save, and it will provide a backfill request. That backfill request will then notify you of how much data you're pulling in from that backfill. It might take a couple, oh, there you go, that was super quick. You can click on to see what that backfill estimate would be. So to go back to April 1st, I'd be pulling in around 50,000 mentions. And then if you wanted to trigger that backfill to actually populate it, you can click on trigger backfill, save your topic, and then you can go back and extract all of those mentions from the dashboard. And again, you can go through and you know, look at all the different backfill requests that are in your instance, which, you know, if you're someone who's managing all of this, is really helpful to be able to see. And, you know, depending on, you know, the instance and the amount of data that we have available, there's also a feature to manage data volume from this post. So we can create a threshold window from like the number of days, years, but we can also set a sampling percentage, which is really nice. So if I want to set like, you know, pull a 10% sample of this larger conversation, all I have to do is type in, you know, a 10% sample, each number of the month, and then a threshold count. You know, you can set that here as well. And you can also get notifications from or to different groups or users based on, you know, the amount of data that they're pulling. All right, I see another question from Kelly. At what point does this count against the number of things we can pull when we create the query, when you toggle the switch, or when you actually export the data from Sprinkler? Kelly, that's a great question. All of the topic searches count against the data mentions that were allotted. It's not necessarily when you create the query, but it is when you toggle the switch. That's when the data pulling starts. And then when you backfill the data, you know, that would also count against some of those mentions. Pranay, am I correct in that?
Yes,
Perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna go in. And, oh, sorry.
I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Brendan. So for example, on the screen that you've got right there, the ones that are blue that say fetching, those are counting against the, I don't know, subscription allotment. I don't know what we would say
Yes,
there, but
that's
Yes.
correct. They're
gray ones are not.
currently, yeah, they're currently pulling data. But again, it's as simple as just going in and stopping it, you know, to cut that off, and it's no longer fetching and it's no longer counting against the volume. But again, and you know, we can set limits on this as well. So like for this particular search, we only wanted to pull a year's worth of data from the entire, you know, previous year. And so topic fetching is not fetching data as we set the end date as January 31st of 2022. So we can kind of control it in that regard as well. Does that answer your question, Kelly?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great. And I see another question. Does it pull from Jason? Does it pull data against the volume automatically? You have to automatically tell it not to. Not sure. Could you clarify that, Jason?
Yeah, so like you've the cursor right there is on fetching, right, for each one. Does it automatically do that, or you have to manually do that to tell it to get it not to pull, or I mean, is it automatically going to that toggle switch be set on?
When you create a topic, you will have the option to tell it when to start fetching the data. So for instance, you can say fetch messages from a start date and fetch messages till. But again, you know, it's as easy as going in and checking the fetching toggle here. So you can do it manually. Pranay, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so just to add on to what Brandon mentioned, so whenever we are creating a topic, by default, the topic would not be fetching data. We would need to manually toggle the switch to fetch, to enable the topic to fetch data.
Yeah.
Hope that answers the query.
Exactly. Let's see. And again, you know, we can add a number of different tags associated with these topics, different topic groups. One of the things that I really like about this too is that, you know, on an administrative side, you can see who owns these different topics, when they were created, when they've been last modified. And you can download all of this as well into an Excel spreadsheet, so you can have all that information readily available to you as well. So again, from an administrative standpoint and being able to manage, you know, the data that's coming in and where it's coming from and who's searching for it is super helpful, especially from a research perspective. Are there any other questions?
Brendan, did you, and I was trying to look at questions and emails and stuff at the same time, so I might have missed this. Did you show how you can, I know there's like this limit thing, like where you can say, okay, if it gets this many, then just stop. Or maybe it's a percentage, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, just stop, because I might be sleeping and the internet might be blowing up and I don't want you to use all my mentions.
Right, exactly. And that's where this managed data function, managed data volume comes into play. So if I click on, you know, manage data volume, we've got these different threshold windows, threshold count, we can do a sampling percentage, and then we can reset the threshold count with a different date in the future as well. But we also, you know, can notify users if we're reaching our threshold count. So I can, you know, create or add emails to send an immediate notification if we're reaching our threshold.
Great, thanks. Thanks for showing where that is too.
Sure. Excellent.
And I don't know how many attendees are wondering this, but I know a question that's come up sometimes is like, well, what are the costs of these mentions? Like, what if I just want to get every last mention of something, but I know it's going to be a lot. I know that each subscription comes with a certain amount of minimum, not like you can use up to this many mentions without greater cost, but then once you get beyond that, how much do they cost? Do you remember?
So Pranay, that might be more.
I can jump in here. Yeah.
Tom, yeah.
Yeah. Great question and great job on the presentation. This is really wonderful. Yeah. So we typically offer those mentions in 1 million increments. But we've been known to do 500,000 increments, depending on the situation. We can occasionally get that approved. So we don't necessarily want to break the bank for anybody, but so those are kind of the general increments in which we will set and structure up the agreement, if you will, or the contract, and obviously allocate to the system. So and what Pranay does, among many great things, as a success manager to help all of our wonderful folks here that are using Sprinkler with implementation and use, is he will monitor what we call consumption. So he will work with you and monitor that throughout the year on what we call kind of the sync calls or success calls that we have with the Sprinkler customers. And so he will monitor that consumption to make sure that there's no surprises. We kind of know how you're tracking and things like that. So that way we can kind of help manage it. And obviously there's some great features within Sprinkler to be able to kind of control and manage so you don't have any surprises. And we make sure that when you go through training and all that, that it's pretty clear cut. So anyway, long answer to a short question, but hopefully that helps.
The reason I was really asking though was more for like grants. Like if somebody were trying to think like, okay, I'm going to need a bunch and I need to plan it in my grant.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have that in several of our partner relationships where they are very much grant funded. And we can work with you during that grant writing process to not only kind of scope out sort of what you might need for a particular topic. Obviously, you can go into Sprinkler and do some preliminary research and things so you can kind of get a sense. But we can help scope that out for you so that way your ask in that grant is a little bit more specific. But in addition to that, we can also provide some sort of Sprinkler language, if you will, around some of the use cases and some of the things that around Sprinkler and what we're doing within higher education and within the market that you could incorporate into those grant proposals that you're putting together. So yeah, we can do all of that.
And so you said like a million increments. So if somebody were to be thinking about 1 million, do you have kind of a rough cost that usually ends up being, or does it depend on other aspects of the project?
Well, so it's not just that, you also have to have seats as well. And so I would say probably the best thing to do is if someone's interested specifically in pricing, just shoot me an email. And I think my email is out on the web page that has the agenda. So you can just send me an email and I'll get you connected with the right teammate and we can, kind of scope out what you're looking to accomplish. But I think we've been very friendly towards our higher education friends on the pricing component. So happy to chat with you about your specific needs on a particular grant or a project that you're working on. So.
Yeah, and I will say too, one of the things that has been super helpful is that Tom, we've had conversations about the ability to burst as needed. So for instance, if there is a grant project that is coming up and we can fund some additional data pulls from that, the ability to burst and pull more mentions is super helpful.
Yeah, we've got different levers we can kind of pull and kind of make it a little easier and more palatable for you. So no, that's great questions. Yep.
Great.
Super presentation, Brandon. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all so much. And if there are any other questions, I'm happy to to answer them. I'm going to go ahead and let's see, drop my email in the chat here so that anyone feel free to shoot me an email with any questions you might have, and I'm happy to answer them as well.
Okay, I see someone, oh, someone did have their hand up in the attendees and then they put it down before I could see who it was. So if it was somebody in the attendees who wants to ask a question or wants to speak, let me know. But in the meantime, yeah, thank you, Brandon. This was like hugely useful. And I have a feeling that I'm going to go back and like listen, rewatch the recording so I can see how you were clicking around and getting to things. Because sometimes I like know about these features in the, you know, in the back of my head and I forget where they're located and so on. So thanks for taking us through this.
Sure. Yeah, of course. And I will say that, you know, clicking through it and everything, it looks like you're doing things a million miles an hour because there are so many different features and options. But the user interface is really intuitive, and the ability to kind of navigate that is really, really easy. So, well, thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate you. And again, like I said, if there's any questions, feel free to reach out.
So you'll be even more famous as we go back and reference your video.
Exactly. Yeah. Famous and potentially infamous.
Yeah. Goals, Brandon.
Goals. Right. Goals. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Brandon.